I just had a question to a few questions to Mr. Murray. I don't think it's the Muslims of Europe that have failed, the Muslims of Europe that have failed Europe. I think it's exactly the opposite. One of the things you said, it was actually a few Muslims, crazy Muslims, I think, who sort of flew the plane into those buildings. But was Hitler a Muslim by any chance? Because I'm not sure that Muslims had anything to do with the Holocaust.
You know those moments when someone drops hard truths in a room full of polite nodding, and suddenly everyone is feeling itchy in their seats? That's exactly what happens in this not-so-recent debate. Douglas Murray steps up and doesn't hold back. Watch how one British Muslim woman in a headscarf challenges him, claiming she's the one being treated as the problem, and how Murray's logical reply hits the whole house like a thunderbolt. Let's dive in.
Tariq says that Europeans associate Islam with violence. There is some truth in that. There is also a very obvious reason for that, which is that Islam is associated with violence. It was not Buddhists who flew planes into the Twin Towers. It was not Hindus or Jews that blew up the London Underground buses a few years ago. And that simple fact has to be acknowledged if you're even going to start a dialogue. Now, what is happening?
Douglas Murray opens by acknowledging what everyone senses but few say out loud. Europeans link Islam with violence for a simple reason. Recent history shows it. Not Buddhists flying planes into the Twin Towers, not Hindus or Jews blowing up the London Underground. These weren't random acts from other faiths. That basic fact has to be on the table if we're having an honest talk. He points out something mind-blowing about the speed of change, and what he says next will marvel you.
Gentlemen, it's not a pantomime. I'd argue that Europe has done not too badly, considering the circumstances. In the middle of the last century, there was an almost negligible Muslim presence in Europe. At the turn of the 21st, in Western Europe alone, there were 15 to 17 million Muslims. That's a very fast migration, ladies and gentlemen, one of the fastest in human history. And no society would find it easy to deal with that kind of migration. As it happens, European societies, Western European societies have, I think, dealt with this much better than some would. Certainly, Muslims coming to live in Britain and in Western Europe enjoy more rights and better rights, among them freedom of worship, than they do in any Islamic country in the earth here today. We do have a problem. We have a problem when the failures of Islam throughout the world, the failures of all Islamic societies, come here into Britain. Their intolerance of freedom of conscience, their intolerance of apostates, their intolerance of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, their intolerance of minorities, other religious minorities, sexual minorities, their intolerance of gays, their dislike and distrust of half of the population, women, and many, many other things. And the call, what's more, for a parallel legal system within Britain and European societies. This is monstrous. No other group behaves like this, asks for parallel laws. This is a fundamental problem, and it's one we're going to have to deal with. It's a problem between a society, Western Europe, that believes that laws are based on reason, and Islam that believes that they are based on revelation. Between these two ideas...
In the mid-20th century, there were hardly any Muslims in Western Europe. By the early 2000s, 15 to 17 million. One of the fastest migrations in human history. No society absorbs that without strain. It's just plain reality. The absurdity of it is Muslims in Britain and Europe actually enjoy more rights, like freedom of worship, than in most Islamic countries back home. Isn't that worth celebrating? How ironic that ordinary Britons have been pushed to give up their rights for immigrants.
Sure, there is very much compromise for Europe. It is not Europe that has let down its Muslims, but the Muslims of Europe that have let down Europe. This is not solely something which we have to say we can never reconcile. Of course we can reconcile this, but we need to be honest about it. We need to be frank about it, and we cannot avoid things just because they are unpleasant. And if there were one thing I would wish Muslims in Europe could learn today, as fast as possible, it would be this: that you have no right in this society not to be offended. You have no right to say that because you don't like something, you can commit violence, or you would like something to be stopped or censored. You have no right to have more hate laws, or hate crime laws, or hate speech laws, just to defend Islam. You have to realize, the Muslims of Europe have to realize, that a society in which even your deepest feelings can be trodden upon is the only society worth living in. And the sooner we can learn that, the sooner that Islam can learn that within Europe, the better. It is not Europe that has failed its Muslims. It is Islam that has failed Europe. I'd argue Islam has failed its Muslims.
The problems weren't invented by Europe. They're imported when the failures of many Islamic societies, intolerance of apostates, free speech, minorities, gays, women show up here. Demands for parallel Sharia legal systems. That's not how a free society built on reason works. It's revelation versus evidence, and those don't mix easily. At this point, a young woman in a headscarf stands up, and the words that come out of her mouth are an absolute example of double standards and entitlement. Then watch how Murray flips the script on her entirely.
I just had a question to a few questions to Mr. Murray. I don't think it's the Muslims of Europe that have failed, the Muslims of Europe that have failed Europe. I think it's exactly the opposite. One of the things you said, it was actually a few Muslims, crazy Muslims, I think, who sort of flew the plane into those buildings. But was Hitler a Muslim by any chance? Because I'm not sure that Muslims had anything to do with the Holocaust. Okay.
She sounds smug and all. But here's where it gets interesting. The lady frames herself and her community as victims of Europe, while Douglas Murray has been talking about bigger cultural clashes. Just before we get to Murray's response to her, listen to what other Muslims in the audience said that reveals the depth of their ignorance.
In 2009, the Centre for Muslim Studies, along with the Gallup poll, interviewed 500 British Muslims. Over 99.5% of those British Muslims found homosexual acts unacceptable. What was interesting is that the government has given concession to Muslims as well as other religious organisations. So it seems to me, in fact, this government here is prepared to give religious organisations, including Muslims, the rights over lots of gay men and women.
Okay. Gentleman up there.
You talked about how Europe has dealt with this problem, and what you basically have alluded to in the 6 minutes that you had are that Muslims are a problem. And you're from the organisation called the Centre for Social Cohesion, and it's worrying that to have you talk about these things in this manner. What you are basically alluding to is that Muslims are external to Europe, and it's worrying that you see it that way, because then that means there is no chance of there being any solution to any problem or Muslims being seen as a part of Europe and being seen as European citizens. Thank you.
Gentleman there.
I just want to pick up something that Douglas Murray said. I'd like to ask you, when you talk about the Muslims that are the problem, which Muslims are you talking about? Because you keep slipping in your language to focus on the radicals, the extremists.
Okay,
Maybe that's because that's what you're interested in. But there's another whole set of Muslims out there who are not like that.
Okay, just a quick clutch there.
It is sufficient to point out that Europe is not failing its Muslims, that this debate is taking place tonight and is being televised by the BBC World Service, that Tariq Ramadan holds a chair at Oxford University. I put it to you because of these very facts, that you are being welcomed, that you are being integrated, that you are being respected. You are not a problem.
Okay.
Think about it like this. Imagine inviting someone into your house and they start rearranging the furniture to match rules from their old home, rules that clash with how your family lives. You can be kind, but you can't pretend the clash doesn't exist. A free society means even your deepest beliefs can get challenged. No special hate speech laws just to protect one religion. No right to violence or censorship when offended. That's the price of living in the West, and it's worth it.
Our panel.
I'm a British female. I love this country and I give this country. Now you're calling me a problem. I don't think I am. I think you are. Second point is, as a Muslim female, okay, my parents might not let me go somewhere late at night because people are racist to me. They tell me to go back home and they hurt me. I got hit by 2 white guys and they laughed at me because I'm a scarfy, okay? Last point is to Mr. Fleming, about the point where you said, about the religion, changing religion. Every person has the right to. No one says anything about that. But if you had a daughter or a son that wanted to become a Muslim, would you be happy about that? I don't think so.
I mean, it's their choice. And I can tell you, I am...
But that wasn't what she asked. Would you mind? She said, would you mind?
No, I wouldn't. Of course not. I mean, I am married to an immigrant myself who comes from another community than the one I come from. So, in fact, I have been living this kind of experience for the past 30 years. And yes, there were some members of my family who were quite critical about that, but it was my choice.
All right. Hypothetically speaking, Douglas Murray, what would you say to that lady?
True tolerance isn't never being offended. It's learning to handle it without demanding the whole culture bend for you. Now watch how Murray makes a philosophical point that will stick with you long after this video.
I mean, I would hope that if somebody has access... Look, what Fleming and I are arguing for is that people have the right to access all of the kind of opinions, all of the knowledge that they can. That means, among other things, having, for instance, access to all of the criticism that should be written of the Quran and of Islam. And if they weigh up after knowing all of these things and having access to all of them that they would like to become Muslim, I don't have a problem with that.
All right. Good. You answered the question. Petra.
When my daughter was born in '98, I called her Soraya, which is the Arabic name for Pleiades, because I felt that she needed to have a present for the rest of her life. After 9/11, people asked me whether I had regretted giving her an Arabic name. And I felt sorry for the person who asked that question.
So what's the point you're making? That there's prejudice against...
No, the point I'm making is, and I think it's the point the lady is making as well, that the fact that people are called Muhammad is probably, in the perception of many, putting them in a disadvantage. And of course, I totally disagree.
Okay. You want to come, because I want to get some response to what we heard out, some of the comments our audience made.
I'd just like to make a comment on one of the cases that Petra made, which was about Ahmed Abu Talib, a very distinguished public figure in Holland. What you failed to mention when you mentioned him as a great success story of the Netherlands, which I agree he is that after the murder of Theo van Gogh in 2004, he had to go under 24-hour protection because his name was found on a hit list from a radical cell nearby. We cannot simply take, Petra, the terrific success stories and ignore things like that. It is no small thing that a Muslim politician who speaks out should be targeted for assassination in his home country of the Netherlands.
Throughout this whole exchange, notice how one side talks about evolving interpretations and choices, while Murray keeps bringing it back to facts on the ground, parallel societies, demands that don't match secular laws based on reason, intolerance baked into some texts and practices that haven't reformed enough. It's relatable, right? You move into a new neighborhood expecting to blend in, but instead you start pushing for your old rules to dominate. Murray isn't saying every Muslim is a problem, far from it. He's saying ignoring patterns of cultural incompatibility helps no one, especially moderate Muslims trying to live peacefully.
Right, Ramadan, we get the point, yeah?
Once again, I think that you are taking one story and then
the one she took.
No, it is, and many Muslims around the world and in the Netherlands were against that and attacked the small groups that were saying this. And this is the case today in Europe. The discourse that you have is helping to nurture this sense of alienation and not to let the Muslims feel that they are at home. And out of the questions that we got from here, people are saying, you are welcome here, and then in their own country. I'm sorry, I'm at home. I'm at home. What are you talking about? Don't talk about. So, talk to me. I'm sorry. Talk to us, or talk to me as a fellow European, and not as someone who is an outsider infiltrating the freedom of expression and using this. This is one. Let me finish.
Can I come back?
It's the sheer entitlement in his voice. When he begins to speak like this, you just wonder, why not go back to the land of his birth? Islam isn't a race, it's a set of beliefs open to scrutiny, just like any other. That distinction is crucial because races can't change. But ideas must.
No, I'm not saying you're not a European, but I would appreciate the following, which is that don't come to this hall and tell this hall that you're a European, and go to another and talk to an Islamic audience as Islamic brothers. Because that is what you have spent your career doing.
What's wrong?
Speaking through. Let me finish this. And Tarek comes here one day and says, we fellow Europeans, we all speak to each other as fellow Europeans. And another, he speaks to a Muslim audience and says, we as Muslims. Which is it, Tarek? Which is it?
I'm a Muslim.
You can't pretend you have two identities. Come just say
you know what?
Can I say something about
But you are my...
Okay, you two, just a minute. We get your point. Let's see, Fleming and then Petra. And on this point, this specific point, can Tarek Ramadan be Muslim and European? And is there a problem with standing with Muslims and saying, I'm a fellow Muslim, but also being European? Douglas seems to have a problem with that.
Of course not. Of course not. But I'm not finished. Islam is not a race. And why is this important? Because if it's race, you don't have a chance to change it. I mean, communists were also being discriminated during the Cold War, but that's also an ideology, although another kind of ideology. So you have to insist that Islam is a set of ideas, and you have the freedom to change, to leave, to criticize, to ridicule, and so on and so forth. And it's very, very different
You have
from
problems with freedom
racism.
of speech and what you've encountered amongst some Muslims, is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, Petra, on this question of identity, I think was the key
Well, I mean,
one.
it almost seems as if the only good Muslim would be an ex-Muslim. And so for me, how enlightened are we if we only welcome people who are like us? I mean, like you and me. I mean, can we actually accept people who think differently? I think this is when our values are really tested. And of course, when people are thinking differently and don't want to change religion, that's also a universal.
By the end, you're left thinking, what does real integration look like? Not importing problems and demanding silence about them. Not crying Islamophobia every time someone points out failures in women's rights, free speech, or loyalty to host values. Europe opened doors in good faith, taking advantage of that generosity while rejecting the Enlightenment principles that made it possible. That's where the double standards are.
Petra, what about one of the questions that we had from the floor, which is somebody expressed the view that women have said that they enjoy more freedom in the Middle East than they do actually when they come to Europe, which is kind of
we in the Netherlands, we have a political party which is in parliament which doesn't allow women to run for office. And I don't hear the same voices about this party as I hear about Muslim women.
I do want to ask about women and Islam, because this is something, we've had some contributions from the floor on that, and women wearing their veils and so on. I mean, this is something which does exercise a great deal of debate. The fact that a lot of people feel that you can't be a Muslim woman and enjoy certain freedoms. How do you address that?
No, I think that we have to acknowledge the fact that there are problems, but we also have to acknowledge the fact that things are evolving, that there is and there are Muslim women in Europe today who are leaders in the leadership and coming with new interpretation. When it comes, for example, something which is very simple about the headscarf. It's against Islam to impose it, it's against human rights to impose to take it off. This should be the point, and this is why we should be in agreement. Second point, against forced marriages. We had campaigns in Europe against forced marriages. And then when it comes to anything which has to do with reading the text, being able to come and to get a sense of autonomy for women, this is happening. So I would say that in some countries where you wear the headscarf, by definition, you can't be a free Muslim woman because the way you dress. I think it's wrong. Let the people decide and let them speak for themselves and listen. Listen, because sometimes they speak and they are not listening.
Murray speaks for the taxpayer, wondering why neighborhoods changed fast, why certain crimes and attitudes spike in some communities, and why questioning it gets you labeled. It's not hate to want your daughters safe, your streets peaceful, your laws universal. It's basic common sense.
I have a direct question to Tariq. What will you do if you find out that a woman is not wearing that dress by her own choice? What will your opinion be?
It happened, and I did it and I said it to some of the, at least now in my mind there are two, who asked me about the fact I don't want to wear it, and this is imposed by my father, and once by my mother. I said, resist. Don't accept something which is against your freedom, because it has to be your choice and it's an act of faith. So for the dignity of Muslims, you have to...
This clip from over a decade ago feels even more relevant now. We've seen more examples of grooming scandals, no-go zones, demands for Sharia patrols, and polls showing large minorities holding views on apostasy, homosexuality, and women that clash hard with Western life. Yet the same defensive playbook, victimhood, deflection, special protections keeps playing.
There's a big debate at the moment in Europe, isn't there, in France in particular, about the niqab, the full face veil, and even people like Rachida Dati, the former French cabinet minister, has said that she is opposed to that. But Douglas, I want to ask you, you heard some of the people from the floor there, the woman complaining about attacks on her because she's described as a scarfie because she wears a head veil. I mean, that is something that you would regret. I mean, that doesn't promote social cohesion, does it?
Nobody thinks that any physical attacks or any such thing could be a good thing to happen. Of course not. Of course, there are. Let's make sure we're right.
She's talking about prejudice there.
Exists in society. Let's just be absolutely clear. This is an audience. Prejudice undoubtedly exists in this society. It exists across racial groups, including from minorities to other minorities, after all, which is one of the things we see increasingly in Britain these days. And it is also the case that people, in particularly famously lower socioeconomic groups, are likely to feel hatred for other groups. That is one of the things that has to be tackled, and everyone, I think, in this hall, I'm sure, we're in agreement that that should be tackled. But do not mix up somebody, a thug, a racist, and so on, attacking somebody in a street with the right of Fleming and me to say what we see in the Quran, what we think of Muhammad, and maybe even asserting our right to say so.
Okay, all right.
Douglas-Murray didn't humiliate the Muslims on that table personally. He froze the easy narrative by refusing to play pretend. In a world drowning in emotional manipulation, straight talk like this is seriously refreshing, even if it's uncomfortable to admit. What do you think? Does demanding zero offence help Muslims integrate, or does it create more distance? Have you seen similar clashes in your own town? Kindly drop your honest thoughts in the comments. If you're tired of tiptoeing around these issues and want more unfiltered breakdowns like this, hit like, subscribe, and share with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching.